Hello, and welcome. I just want to ask a question, and this is just for you to just wrap your brain around. Have you ever felt like you are on an island when it comes to parenting because you're doing things your own way? They may be against the norm, or maybe you're just curious about this whole. It's not a new thing, honestly. It is new for me, but are you just curious about different ways of parenting that may be different from how you were raised? And if all of this resonates with you, then stick around because we're going to talk about a few of those things. My name is Keisha B, and we're here doing a generational transformation talk series. We have no clue what we're doing. We're just moms with kids. I say plural for my two friends over here. I have two dogs and a husband. I don't know if that counts as kids, but that's for another episode. But anyway, this is episode 1, Beginner's Path to Intentional Parenting and Breaking Patterns. And just a disclaimer, we're not psychologists. We're not doctors. We're just sharing our story, and that's it. So I'm going to tell you real quick. I was raised by a single mom half time, and then the other half time I was raised by my grandparents. And I'm married to my best friend. He is my person. I'm 40 years old, fun fact, with a 2-year-old. So that can give you some clues as to how long it took me to even want to have a child. And when you find your person, sometimes you change your mind. So that's me. Our kid will be 3 next month, though, December. And we're in the year of 2023, just in case this video is spotted years from now. Anyway, so yeah, I'm married with an almost 3-year-old, and that's my story. And so I have 2 friends here, and Lygia, you want to go next and just tell us who you are?
Yeah. My name is Lygia. I am the parent of 2 teenagers and 1 toddler. He's 2. And I was raised by 2 parents who were married and economically stable. And I am once divorced and twice married. And the experience has been worlds different for my older children and my younger child.
Love that.
I'm Carrie, and I am married. I've been married for, I think, 16 years. And I have 3 kids, 14, 12, and 3.5. And I grew up in a family. My mom and dad were together. We had a little short separation, but they went back together after that. But I'm the oldest of 5. And from the outside, everything seemed real normal, real good, but things were a little more dysfunctional from the inside out, which I didn't even realize until I was much older. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you both for being here. And for anyone watching, it will say that we are live right now in Facebook, and we actually are using a platform called StreamYard. So if you are commenting, we're not going to be able to comment back right away, but we will be monitoring this page, and we'll be able to respond to any comments that you have. And if you need to message me privately, because I know that some of these topics are going to be very sensitive. And so if Facebook doesn't allow you to post anonymously, then message me privately, and we can definitely get in touch. And I'm sure Carrie and Lygia will be more than willing to give you any kind of words of encouragement after this airs. So, all right, let's talk names of parenting styles that we know of. And again, this is just in our own research. We are not psychologists. So let's just go around, the 3 of us, and kind of spit out some names that we've heard for parenting styles. And Carrie, Lygia, if you don't mind to maybe elaborate more on that particular parent style that you've heard of. And I'll just start with one that I've heard a lot of: conscious parenting. I used that term for myself initially because I didn't know what I mean. I still don't know. I still don't really give it a label. But when somebody asks me, well, what kind of parenting is that? And I'm like, I'm aware, I'm conscious. So I started using that word conscious parenting, which still people are going to ask questions. It's not the norm for a lot of people to hear these things. But I do love intentional parenting, and I heard that first from Lygia, so I appreciate you putting that out there, and that's why we titled it this, intentional. But with conscious parenting, I just knew that I was very aware, like eyes wide open, no blinders. I knew I needed something different for my kid, and like Carrie was saying, like she didn't even know things were dysfunctional until she was much older. Same, like, and I'm not even saying that my family was dysfunctional. I'm just saying that and I'm not speaking for Carrie. I'm just saying for my upbringing, I just knew I had a single mom, a dad that chose a different path, not being a dad, and my grandparents trying to do the best they could to help a struggling mother who was working around the clock. You know what I mean? So conscious parenting is what I was calling it. And if you guys, I don't know who wants to go and just call out some parenting styles that you've heard of and maybe elaborate on what you have learned that it is and what it isn't.
Sure, I'll go. So when I first was sort of trying to figure out what to call my switch over to a different way versus more of the traditional style, I was looking at gentle parenting and also attachment parenting. And attachment parenting is a lot about the doings of being a parent and doing things to kind of meet your kids' needs. And then later on in my searching for things, I found respectful parenting and I found non-coercive parenting. I really, really liked the people who are promoting those titles. I liked the way they spoke to their children, they spoke about children. So I've leaned more into that, and going that route, I found also trauma-informed parenting. And that is where I found out about attachment theory, which is very different than attachment parenting. And I think that attachment parenting has very good intentions, and the idea is to meet the needs of your kid, but it's a lot about the doings. And after reading about attachment theory, which I really should be able to throw out these names because I read them all the time, but because I'm on here, I can't think of any of them. Bowlby, John Bowlby, I think is his name, is the guy who started that. With attachment theory, it's really about creating a secure attachment with not just your children, but yourself and your partner, whoever you're with. And that is more about being and how you're relating to your child. And so that is sort of the path that I'm walking now, is trying to create a secure attachment. And I like the respectful parenting or non-coercive parenting sort of labels, I guess.
Okay. The labels that I have encountered, gentle parenting, intentional parenting, respectful parenting, non-coercive parenting is new to me, but I really love it, and it falls in line with my goals. I have been a nanny and a preschool teacher for 19 years. And as a preschool teacher, I wasn't a daycare teacher. I was intentionally putting in a lot of hours into ongoing education and reading the most recent articles and studies. As a nanny, I've worked with a lot of people who say, oh, I'm a gentle parent. And what I find is they're a little bit confused about what gentle means. And I strongly feel that gentle parenting is different than permissive parenting. Permissive parenting allows you to say yes to everything. And sometimes that's not in the best interest of your child. With gentle parenting or intentional parenting, you do want what's best for your child, and you're going to set some boundaries and set some expectations, but meet them in a respectful way. So when I do have to say no to something, I'll explain why and not try to shame my child or berate my child or bribe my child. I tell them what the boundary is or what my expectation is, and make it clear that I love them and I need them to meet the expectation. I think that covers all of the things that I've heard of.
I love that. And Carrie, just curious, what do you know? You were saying like attachment theory versus attachment parenting. Can you elaborate more on the attachment theory?
Sure. So if you want to really go into this, you can Google like what is my attachment style? And there's all these quizzes online, and you can kind of figure out if you have the way you relate to basically most likely it's your romantic partner is what they're usually measuring on this, but it'll give you an idea on how you're relating to them. And they break it down into there's secure attachment and insecure attachment. And under the insecure attachment, there is avoidant and ambivalent, I think is the other one. So you can kind of see your tendency of how you try to meet your own needs with another person, or how you are uncomfortable and sort of like step away from another person. It kind of shows you just kind of the relating. And typically the way we relate to our loved ones now as adults is reflective of how we were treated when we were children. And so it can give you a lot of information about, you know, what attention you got as a kid if you don't really remember exactly, you know, maybe how you were parented exactly. Because the actual events that happened don't really matter if you're trying to do self-healing, because whatever is present right now is what you can work on. So you can know what your tendency is. If your tendency is to cling and really need someone to give you a certain phrase so that you feel safe and secure, or whether you are like, you know, I'm not talking to you anymore, and you kind of just shut off and kind of run away. So there's different tendencies depending on where you fall. And typically the way you're relating to your loved one is how you're going to sort of respond or react when your kids are upsetting you. It kind of can give you, you know, a way to kind of see what's happening. And then your kids are going to, you know, they absorb this. They don't really do what we say, they do what we do, right? They are just like little sponges. And so it's interesting when you become conscious, like the conscious parenting, and you notice these patterns, because then it's all information. So my kid is screaming and yelling because they're mad. Maybe they're older than like, you know, tantrum age. They're like 12, like mine. And I'm like, that sounds like something I would have said. So then it kind of like, okay, so she learned that from me. And when am I reacting like that? And what is that trigger? You know, it can kind of just bring you right back to yourself and understand yourself a little bit more. And there's really no shame in it. It's just the patterns that you have, and you can change them. So yeah, that's the attachment theory. It goes deeper into like parenting. You can actually, there's like, I want to say like 5 core needs, and I don't have the book for that here on my shelf, but you can intentionally try to be present and meet these needs as a parent, which really gives you a nice path of what to do when everything feels like you're just bombarded with lots of information and lots of strategies and lots of say this or do this or have your kid, you know, there's so many things. But if you know these core principles of what kids really need emotionally, mentally, how you're supposed to be with them, once you know that, you can just make your own strategies. You can just come up with these ideas. It's so much easier when you like understand those core needs that go way beyond just food and sleep and that kind of stuff.
What you said in there about stopping yourself and reflecting, it is so powerful. It gives me chills. When you were just saying it, I still have chills, and I'm like, that's the key. That's the key. Like that's my next question for you guys. When did it click for you as a parent that, hey, I want to do something different? And here's another thing. For anybody watching I don't want this video to be viewed as we are shaming anyone, because I've always said we work with the tools that we have in that moment. Our parents, generations before us, it could have just been a lack of tools. And I'm saying tools, knowledge.
Mhm.
So I just want to get that out there. Like, in my family, if they're watching, which I do hope they do, it's not to shame anyone. You did the best that you could. I just love that Carrie was saying, I stop, I reflect. What triggered me? Like, we all have triggers. How do we respond to those triggers? We are all human. So when did it click for you guys? And then I can share when you guys are finished, when it clicked for me that I wanted to do something different as far as parenting with my kid versus how I was raised.
I'll go. So I had my oldest child 19 years ago, and the first thing that I wanted to do was nanny in a position that I could bring her along with me. And my first nanny kids were 8 and 11. They were old enough. They were young enough to think that having a baby around was cool. And I really appreciated the way that their parents raised them, and, was curious about it because it's very different than my family of origin. But what really, really turned me around was my first job at a preschool, where everything was very intentional. You ask a child before you pick them up. And I was like, that's crazy. You just pick them up and move them. And a teacher explained to me, she was like, well, how would you like it if somebody picked you up and moved you? Or you fell down and I ran over and grabbed you and put you back on your feet. I was like, no, I would want to get up by myself. And at that moment, I was like, I'm not going to pick up children if they can do it. I'll ask, are you okay? Did that hurt? Do you want help to get up? But I don't just take over their body. And it was such a new idea to me to treat children as people and not move them without their permission. There are times like you're in charge of your body, but if it's a diaper change, I have to do it. You can help, or you can be mad, but it has to be done. Or brushing teeth. You can be mad, but I have to do it. But if it's not about health or safety, if it's about climbing, I'll say, do you feel safe? I don't feel safe about you doing that, but do you feel safe? And really letting kids decide what they want to do. And I get a little bit jealous sometimes because my parents never would have let me do that. My parents never would have let me climb the table to reach snacks. But it's built so much independence in my children. So I'm glad that I found it when I did. My oldest was very young, so I got to start almost right away with the intentional, respectful parenting that I missed in my childhood.
I love that. I wanted to be a kid at that preschool, whatever preschool that was. I mean, that was 19 years ago.
It was phenomenal.
Very progressive, in my opinion, just like. So, and you just gave some clues about episode 2, which will be about autonomy, empowering expressions, gratitude, and affection. So stay tuned for that. Let's talk about kind of the resistance that we've experienced with friends, strangers, family. And I'll finish real quick. I knew that I wanted to do something different when my kiddo started to crawl. I was like, I don't want to, like, what am I going to do with discipline? Like, I don't want to be coercive at all. Even though that's how I was raised, I don't want any of that. So then I started doing research, and when we end this talk series, we'll kind of throw out some names of some resources that we've all used that we think are gold, which I'm being biased. I just think they're gold, and I want to just hug these people that I've learned from, and the both of you as well. So
let's check in with Carrie about when she turned to intentional parenting.
Yes, thank you. Why am I just thinking we were going in a certain order every time? Okay, Carrie, your turn.
That's okay. I have a very different start than you guys, so it's probably good to throw in my experience there. So I was brought up very traditionally, spankings and a lot of yelling. And I knew that I wanted to do something different because I also started out as a nanny before I had my first. And that's when I started reading a parenting book because I was like, how do I get these kids to do something? Because I wasn't going to like spank someone else's kid. But then when I did have my son, he was a very wild and aggressive toddler. He had a speech delay. He had a lot of sensory issues, and it was chaos. And so I did utilize spanking sometimes and timeouts. And there was one particular time when I don't remember what he did, but I gave him a little swat to the behind and sat him in a corner, and I was very angry. And I turned around and I walked away, and I could hear him getting up, and I turned and he was running at me with like just rage. And he was going to hit me. And what was going to come out of my mouth is, we don't hit. And I'm like, I just hit you. Like, oh my gosh, like, what am I doing? This is not what I want to do. And I mean, I couldn't hold him. I wanted to embrace him, but he was like raging at that moment. So it was like just a lot of tears, a lot of hitting pillows. And that was when I was like, I got to do something else. And I don't know what to do. And it would take me, I would say he was probably like 2 or 3 until he was around 6 or 7 that I actually found Whole Brain Child by Siegel. That's his name, right?
Yeah.
Which really opened up my mind. And then I just have gone down this path. So I'm still in the process of like undoing so much because we did not have any sort of attachment parenting, attachment theory, gentle. None of this was happening in my first 2 very young years. It was rough, but yeah, you can, switch gears anytime.
Yeah. So how many years ago was that? How old is
my oldest now, who I was just talking about, is 14. So I have been, I guess you could say, on the path of gentle parenting since around he was like 7-ish, but the whole respectful, non-coercive parenting has been the last few, I would say 3 or 4 years that I've really been like trying to figure that out and how to do that. Because once they get older and they can talk to you, there's some logic conversation happening, but then there's a lot of pushback with old patterns, and it can be very hard to switch gears. Like the patterns, the programs that were sort of like put in place, like they're looking for the familiar response. They're looking for me to yell, and I'm not yelling. And that's uncomfortable when they've been yelled at. And it seems so backwards, but it is hard. So it can be done, but it's challenging.
And go ahead.
Same thing. I've experienced that too. That what was modeled for me in my childhood was one way: spanking and yelling and timeouts, and it's ingrained in you. It's trained. This is how mothers act. This is how parenting is. This is how discipline is. And I've definitely found myself doing things and then stop and been like, what am I doing? Yeah. And so you're not the only one who's been like, this is crazy. Let me start over. And similarly to you, my kids were very confused. They're like, you were yelling and now you're calm, and that's uncomfortable. And I don't know what to expect from you.
Yeah.
And relearning, how to parent from not having an example, just kind of trying to pull it out of thin air is really tough. And I'm so proud of everybody who attempts it and who does it or who wants to do it and think, I could learn a different way, but it's going to be tough. Mm-hmm. Thanks for letting me speak, Keisha.
I love that. And actually, I thought you were going to say something totally different. So I'm glad I can just say, I hope the 2 of you allow yourself some grace and some compassion for having, and I try and say things more positive than negative, but I hope that you allow yourself forgiveness again for not having the tools that you have now when you first started out with this parenting journey. I mean, I think a lot of people, I know my mother specifically was like, well, I didn't know any better. I didn't know any better. And like, she beats herself up and she's like, well, you read so much and you learn so much. And I didn't have you're right. They weren't this. I'm shocked to hear that both of you have done this for 19 and 14 years, because the information that I'm finding is they've been doing research for 40 years, and we're just now starting to hear more and more of it about a non-coercive parenting. Yeah, I mean, I know that we could go on and on with this episode, and I love this topic. Just please tell me that you both have gotten to a point in your heart, in your mind, in your family, like your immediate, your little family, that you do allow yourself forgiveness.
No, absolutely. I have explained to my older children why they were parented differently than little guy. And I said, I didn't have support. I didn't have financial security. I didn't have knowledge like the books and the internet that's available now. I didn't have any of the tools or the patience or the emotional bandwidth to do it right. I did the best that I could with the resources that I had. And now that I have support, financial security, and years of experience, I can do better. But you can't do better without the skills and the knowledge.
Absolutely. And I think we will pick up in episode 2 and talk more about maybe some things that we hear with our parenting journey that we were going to mention in this episode. But I have a feeling when we start talking about something in episode 2, they will surface. So in closing, what advice would you give? And do you want to mention any resources, especially with the technology, like the social media route? Because I know that a lot of us, like here we are on Facebook, are using social media. Like the Whole Brain Child is a book. I'm sure they could get it on Kindle or whatever other platforms are out there. It's just such a great book. But if we could close with advice for someone that's going this route or is questioning what we're doing, or it's like, yes, that's what I've been wanting to call it, and I don't know what it is, and I need to know more. Okay, advice for them and resources, and go.
I'll tell you that Dan Siegel, who wrote The Whole Brain Child, also has a book that I'm going to show you called Parenting from the Inside Out. And talking about generational trauma, you have to know what you are bringing to the table. You have to understand your childhood and make sense of it. And then you'll be able to make sense of what's happening for your kids between you and them. And so this book will help you do that. And this book will just give you like the understanding of how kids work and how you need to talk to them in a respectful way. But I would say the advice is that inner child healing is going to help you heal or be more present with your kids. It's like a double thing. It happens at the same time. You heal your kid and you help your kids at the same time.
For resources, I want to go down 2 paths. If reading is your thing, there are hundreds of books out there, and maybe it's hard to choose. I strongly recommend books written by Magda Gerber. And you can search for things about gentle parenting, whole brain child, intentional parenting. If reading is not your thing and you're leaning towards TikTok and Reel and Instagram, there are several people that you can follow who really have nailed this, or like us, are learning this and practicing this and making mistakes and saying, this is what I could have done differently. I will come back into the comments and recommend a few of those people that I like to follow. I like to see what they're doing. And it reinforces me, like, I'm not alone in this. Lots of people are trying this. Lots of people are struggling. So depending on what your learning style is, I think there's a lot of resources for you.
Love it. With social media, because that's how I found myself. Actually, I did pick up The Whole Brain Child. I think I ended up putting that book on my registry for my like baby child because I read like what it was about and I was like, oh my God. But it didn't click until later because I didn't read it until later because I was scrolling one night on social media when my kid was starting to crawl. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm walking into this. When do we start discipline? I know I didn't want to punish. I wanted to do discipline. Anyway, so here's my list and I'll put it in the comments. I think we'll all put in our resources in the comments. But High Impact Club was my first thing that I found on social media. I think she's on like all platforms. I feel like Attachment Nerd, Conscious Mommy, and then Destiny. I think her name's Destiny Ann, but she is like real talk, but very much on the same path. She just has a lot more experience than I do. Again, we'll put our resources in the comments and advice. Open up your mind to doing something different that may be terrifying to you. And just like these two lovely guests that are with me, they have tried it. And if it doesn't work, you pivot, you pivot, you pivot. You do what's going to work for you and what you feel good about doing. Okay, well, stay tuned for episode 2. And we are calling it Redefining Gratitude, Affection, and Autonomy, which is empowering expressions. All right, we're signing off. Until next time, everyone. Bye.